Hi, my name is Jordan. I am a special education teacher from the UK. I share my passion for everything communication, sensory regulation, and fun lesson ideas for my classroom of disabled pupils aged 4 to 11. Each week, I am joined by experts in the field, answering your questions and sharing our knowledge and experience working alongside our beautiful young people. Let's get started. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Sensory Classroom podcast. My name is Jordan and today I am joined by Jess, who's a secondary school SENCO, and I was very lucky enough to be on her podcast a couple of months ago and I couldn't wait to have her back. We've definitely got more to talk about, haven't we, Jess?
I'm looking forward to this podcast so much. We've got so much to chat about. I know as professions we're both teachers, but I can imagine our roles are very different, so I'm looking forward to getting into it.
It's exactly why I wanted you on here. We've had lots of speech and language therapists, we've had lots of special education teachers, occupational therapists, but we haven't had any mainstream secondary school teachers. And the fact that you're a SENCO as well, it is so aligned and there are so many similarities. Let's get into the differences. I know lots of people that listen to my podcast have children of all ages that they teach and all abilities. So yeah, I thought it would be really important, but it is different. So can you describe a little bit about what you do in the school, what your role is, and then the level of need that you support as well?
Of course. So I'm a secondary school science teacher, so that's what I trained as. So I went through the PGCE route. So that was what I became first. And I teach teenagers, GCSE and A levels, which has its different challenges in itself, as you can imagine, dealing with the teenage boys and teenage girls and all the hormones. It's very fun. It's really interesting because when I chat to primary school teachers, often they say to me, oh my gosh, I could not deal with that age group. But I'm the exact opposite. I couldn't deal with little children. So I love dealing with the teenagers. And actually, I teach 11 to 18 and I always prefer teaching the 16 to 18-year-olds. I absolutely love it.
That's amazing. And then what about level of need as well? Because some of our pupils in mainstream primary schools aren't able to get a special education place. So they are going to secondary schools. Is that something you're seeing? Are you seeing an increase in quite complex learning needs?
Yeah. So if we boil it down to what it used to be like, so in the 2000s, 3% of kids at secondary school mainstream education were classed as being on the SEND register. In 2014, that increased to 14%. And then in 2018, just before COVID, it was around 15%. And now it's gone up even more to 18, 19%. So nearly 20% of our kids now are on the SEN register.
In a really short time.
In such a short space of time, which is amazing because it means that we are giving kids access to these diagnoses that previously were never talked about, weren't ever assessed for. Like, it's great. It's a shame that when teachers for secondary school are going through their training that we're not having more training on special educational needs and disabilities, because we've got 20% of our kids that fall in that bracket now.
Yeah, 20% of our training should be on special education, right?
Exactly. And the biggest group within that is children that are on social, emotional, mental health part of it. So that is actually the growing category. So it's quite a grey area for a long time of what had to be in place for a pupil with social, emotional, mental health. It used to be that a GP diagnosis of anxiety was enough to have that on the school register, and then we can provide the support that they need. But actually now, it's only coming recently, it has to be done by a ed psych or a psychologist. So it's not enough just to have a GP diagnosis anymore. So yeah, we're seeing massive growths in secondary school with people on this SEND register. It's gone up nearly 20%. In 25 years.
Does the fact that it has to be done by an educational psychologist mean longer waiting times now? Because they're really hard to get hold of, aren't they? Because I know you need that for the autism diagnosis, and there's a 2 to 4 year wait for an autism diagnosis. Is that going to become an issue, do you think, for getting some emotional support as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The word anxiety, they say, the way you talk about it in secondary school, they say that how we used to talk about stress is how kids now talk about anxiety. And there's a lot of education in schools at the moment about teaching kids about feeling anxious and being diagnosed with anxiety are different things. So we're trying to educate the kids on, what those two different things are. It's actually quite normal to feel anxious around your exams and to feel a little bit stressed and your heart racing. That's actually quite a normal feeling because it means you care about what's about to happen. But it's the point where someone is diagnosed with anxiety that actually hinders their results and hinders their ability to sit exams. You're right. There's a massive wait list, and it is about a 2 to 3 year wait at the moment to see anyone, unless, of course, you have money to pay for it privately, which most people don't. And that's the same across all of the need, to be honest. So dyslexia is the shortest wait at the moment, but it's still about 2 to 3 years. ADHD and autism, we're looking at 2 to 4 years, depending on where you are in the country. Same with anxiety, 2 to 4 years, really. But if you pay for it privately, a dyslexia diagnosis is £1,000, whereas ADHD and autism, you're looking at minimum 2.5 grand. So again, it's really difficult. If you have the money, then great, but unfortunately, most people don't. So, for example, if a child came to me and said, I think I may have ADHD, for example, I'd love to go get assessed to then see what exam access arrangement we can offer them. For example, extra time, or giving them access to a smaller room, or having a prompt. Those are all great things, but we need that, paperwork to say that they have this need.
Mm-hmm.
So they come to me in year 10. There's a 3 year waiting list. They've already gone through their exams before they get the diagnosis. And obviously they take their exams in year 11. There are things schools can do, obviously, without the diagnosis officially on paper, but it does make it a lot harder for schools, and it takes up a lot more time and resources.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Especially
what
when
do you do in
20%.
that instance? Like, do you pair them together, provide that anyway? Like, what? Surely there's a limit, isn't there? So the financial budget, tangible limit to how much a school can do without that backing.
Yeah, it's yeah, it is. It's a lot of the school issues though in the UK do come down to budget, unfortunately. So it'd be no surprise any teacher listening to this hearing that. But yeah, it will come. We can do things. It's just a lot easier when you've got a paper diagnosis. The way it works is we can't just award any child 25% extra time, because there needs to be some sort of regulation throughout the whole country about how this is done. Because otherwise you can hand it out to anyone. You just be like, oh, that we think that people needs it. So there has to be some sort of regulation. Yeah, we have to apply for it, which is quite a surprise to a lot of parents or even teachers listening. You have to apply for it. So we would say this pupil needs 25% extra time and a laptop, for example. And we have to collect evidence for about 6 months. We have to do mini assessments with them. We have to put forward their paperwork of their diagnosis. We have to put, notes that this is what teachers also believe. We apply for it to JCQ, the exam board, and they can say yes or no based on the evidence we provide. That is a really long process.
Yeah, I had no idea about this. I had no idea. Is this what you spend a lot of your time doing, is compiling this evidence?
Yeah. So it takes ages. So then you have to apply, and they can reject it if it's not sufficient enough. It sounds a lot of work, and it is, but I completely understand why that process has to be in place, because it needs to be a fair system. Exam access arrangements are fantastic because it's trying to equal out the playing field as much as it can. Like, it's there for a good reason. So they need to have some sort of control over how people are doing it.
Yeah, because otherwise some crooked schools would suggest that lots would have their 25%. Well, then that takes away your actual 25%, doesn't it? Because that's not an equal playing field. That's equality, not equity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in a world where, unfortunately, results are perceived as the most important thing to a school, because parents will decide a lot about where they send their kids based on what results are on their website. That sort of thing can and would happen. So it's absolutely needed. The hardest exam access arrangement to get and apply for is 25% extra time. Regardless to what your profile is, everyone would benefit from 25% extra time. Like, everyone would, regardless to whether they had a diagnosis or not, everyone would benefit. So it's actually the hardest one to get, but it's obviously the one that most people want as well.
Is it the one that has the most impact as well for all people that need it?
It really depends. You could have pupils that just need a prompt, need a refocus. They don't struggle with their handwriting speed or timing or recalling information. They just have these moments where they zone out. So all they need is that one person to be in the room, and all you do is tap the desk, and they're like, "Sorry, yeah, back on it, miss. Don't worry." They really benefit from that. So it really depends. The one that's becoming really popular, which actually you guys that work in primary will obviously know about, is loops.
Yeah.
So previously, obviously teenagers being teenagers didn't want to wear anything in their ears, wasn't cool. You know, you're at that age where you start comparing yourself to other people. Like, it's actually a really natural process. They become very comparative. So wearing these things in your ears was not cool. But then the AirPods came out. So then it became cool to have things in your ears. Now it's actually becoming a cool thing, apparently. This is what the kids are telling me. A cool thing to have loops in.
So they're like ear defenders, right?
Yeah. So loops are mini ear defenders. They look really cool. They just sit in your ears. You can get different colors. So previously, SENCOs have had such a problem with getting kids to wear ear defenders when they become overstimulated, especially actually in exams, when people hyperfocus on other people writing, or that little noise of the exam invigilator, you know, writing down something. That can be a massive distraction for some people, which makes sense. His room is like silent apart from little tiny squeaks and noises. And so getting pupils to wear ear defenders was not cool. You know, they didn't want to sit there. They didn't want to look different. They're at that age. They're 16 years old. You know, probably the person that they're dating is across the room. It's a whole thing with them. So, but now loops are really cool. So I said, you can suggest loops now, and pupils really want to wear them. So
and do you need permission for that, or is that something that is
no?
Right.
I don't have to. No, you don't have to apply for loops, which is great because it makes the process so much easier to apply for, that you don't have to apply for it. It got me thinking about some of the biggest challenges that SENCOs face is that society and kids being teenagers, you know, they don't want to be different. They are at that age where they've come out of primary school and, you know, they start getting their hormones and they're growing up and, you know, they start dating other people and they become so worried about what they appear like that, you know, these little strategies that came into place in primary school, you know, using their fidget toys, you know, having the elastic bands under the table, those sorts of things, they actually stop using completely just because they don't want to be compared. It just got me thinking, now we've come over this social barrier that actually these loops are now a cool thing to wear. A lot of people that do come out of primary school, when they'd use their fidget toys and they'd have their elastic bands and things that they become confident using, actually was really beneficial to them. Just that they won't, and obviously SENCOs will chat to them and say, you know, you used to really benefit from this, it'd be great. And they're like, absolutely not, miss. No, not using it. No,
do you find
not
they
cool.
do other things though, like chew their sleeves or fiddle with pens, chew pens? Like, what kind of things are you seeing that tells you this young person needs these tools?
There's little tells like that, like the chewing of the sleeve is one, or picking of their nails is one. But actually, in the teenage years, it's more acting out because it builds up. Yeah, it builds up because they're not having that release during the day. It builds up and then it comes out as behavior, which is obviously can lead to things like removing from the classroom and then they're affecting their learning. And that's actually the start of the spiral. So it's really hard as a SENCO to have those conversations with the kids when they're at that stage where the most important thing to them is how they look in school, you know, what their peers and their friends think about them. That's the most important thing to a teenager at that point. It's so hard for SENCOs because you just want to say to them,
just do it, it's gonna help you.
Used to do it, or I know this isn't the coolest thing, but you know, and that is probably the biggest challenge of working with teenagers. So with the loops, now they're cool. We don't have any problems with them. But it's interesting how it's these society norms that if I could just click my fingers and think, right, if I could just make fidget toys cool, I would, because it would solve so many challenges that we have as SENCOs, but also help the kids so much.
Yeah.
Because they're so worried about what they look like as teenagers.
Yeah, so I suppose the difference with loops was that it was seen as cool because they might have seen influencers or celebrities wearing them. They're expensive. They're a high class, like high desired item. They're seen as being fashionable, just like certain trainers are, just like certain brands and designs are. So maybe the sensory toy business is missing a trick here. We need to be like getting the celebrities to be wearing big ear
We
defenders
do.
and like using some fidget toys, and then
They
maybe,
do.
yeah.
If they're on TikTok, the kids will wear them, buy them. It's so funny. Any of these influencer TikTok dancers need to get on the fidget toys because it makes my life so much easier.
That's amazing. And that's so interesting as well, because we actually have the opposite problem in primary school. They are very much seen as toys rather than resources. So if a child sees a peer fiddling or twiddling with a fidget or whatever, they will want it. And then the teacher's in this weird space where they want to be affirming to their needs. Maybe they do need it. Who am I to say they don't need it? To having 33 kids in the class that half of them are getting something out of it, or actually technically it'll be 25% are getting something out of it, and 75% are completely distracted because they don't actually need it in the first place. So different, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's the complete opposite of my problem. I remember being that age though. I remember being in those teenage years and you just live in your bubble and all you cared about was what was happening after school.
It matters so much. I do feel like secondary school is really crucial for teaching the important stuff. It really is, the academic stuff. But I think completely equal with that is learning about how to be in a social dynamic, how to make friends, how to form your identity, how to form positive relationships and to break negative relationships. You're learning so much important stuff that will also benefit you in adulthood too. And it's when those two things are trying to be together. I mean, secondary school is an absolute minefield, isn't it? You've got hormones as well. You've got, oh my goodness. Yeah. Your job is not for the weak-hearted, for sure.
It is. I mean, I do love it. I used to not be a teacher and then I came into teaching and I do love it. And I'm glad I chose secondary. It is a crazy world to work in. It's interesting because I think I see these on Instagram all the time. When you talked about your classroom on my podcast a few months ago, we still teach with kids sat in rows. We still teach with kids having one exercise book for the whole class. We still teach with, hands up. And I see it on Instagram all the time where it's, how they used to school back in the 60s and 70s. It's exactly the same as what we do now. Even since I was at school has got so much harder. So much harder for kids. The exams that they sit and the intensity at which they sit them has got so much worse. So when did I sit my GCSEs? 2007? And my science exam was a multiple choice test.
Yeah.
Now it's done. It was 25 minutes. Now it's an hour and 15. And that's just one subject. And these kids are sitting 11.
Wow.
Like, intensity at which they work. And they come in, they sit at their desk, they listen to the teacher, they engage in whatever activity the teacher's set, but it will be at the desk, most likely, majority of the time anyway. We'll be at the desk and, hands up, write your notes, move on to the next lesson. Unless you're doing drama, of course. But, English, maths, science. Science, you can do some practicals, definitely. But the curriculum is so heavy that you do have to do quite a lot of theory work.
What is the benefit of that? Because as a country, we want better results. And if they feel like they're going to get better results doing more practical, keeping kids engaged, then why are they going the opposite of that? Do you know? Can you answer? I don't know. Maybe you can't even answer that question. It's just
no, because there's such a breakdown in the understanding. I think all the people in charge of. I mean, who's the education secretary?
I mean, it changes so often.
Are they a teacher? Probably not.
No, never. They're businessmen. Yeah.
I don't even follow politics because it drives me insane. But I can't imagine they're ever a teacher
No.
or someone that stepped into a mainstream 2,000 kids secondary educational school. I doubt that they're that person. They could be, and apologies if I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong.
Teachers are under so much stress Like when I think of the science curriculum and what I have to teach kids, and it's just a memory game and a knowledge application game, and it's passing an exam, and it's
Which
just
supports some people. Some people learn that way. Some people are very like book-led people. They can retain information, they can regurgitate information, and they remember it. Does that make them standing citizens in adulthood? That's another question. But they can get through their exam. But for so many children, whether they've got a diagnosis or not, that would feel like an impossible task. I was one of them. I am an incredibly intelligent person. I have a 6-figure business. Like, I am on it.
Yeah.
But I really, really just scraped a C's in my GCSE.
Yes.
Like, and I've only got a degree because I chose acting, which was all practical, no essay writing. And because it didn't work for me. But as an adult, I found success, and I feel like children should have the opportunity too. And I feel like because the school system is so built around one way of learning, it's putting people off from further education and any kind of academia or any kind of like teaching, for example, like any kind of career in a way, because they are so tired of feeling stupid. Honestly, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, no, and it is putting people off further education, but then we also live in a society where a degree is almost expected now.
Yeah.
So it really conflicts itself.
Yeah.
Because you're setting up an education system which favours a very small percentage of people. And then you're saying, well, you need a degree. And if you don't have a degree these days, people are like, okay, you don't get an interview. And these jobs, so I can't remember which one, in a bank. So my mum used to work in a bank and she had 1 O-level. Now you need a degree to have that job.
Wow.
And that was, we're talking, 30 years ago?
She was incredible at her job.
Incredible at her job, yeah. Incredible. And it just frustrates me because the conversations I have to have with kids are, what do you want to do in the future? You know, they're choosing their GCSEs, they're choosing their A-levels. Choosing your A-levels determines what universities you can apply for. You're talking to kids about what they want to do in the future. Every single one of them expects them, they have to get a degree. Like, they have to. Like, there's no alternative, and if you do anything else, then it's a failure. But university was created for a very small, very academic group of people, you know? You sit in a lecture theatre for 2 hours and listen to someone and take notes. How many people could actually concentrate for that long?
And it's self-motivated as well, isn't it?
Yeah, regardless of your profile, God, that's a long time to sit there. So again, not everyone was meant to go to university. It was not meant to be a thing where everyone was meant to get a degree because not everyone's on that level.
Yeah, and also the world wouldn't turn. Like, we knew COVID was a perfect example. Everybody who had that kind of academic job was out of work. Who did we actually need? Or I suppose apart from nurses, bless them.
Yeah.
But yeah, who did we actually need? We needed on-the-ground skilled workers that are incredible, that have such great intelligence. It's just not academic intelligence.
Yeah.
They are practical problem solvers that are really hardworking and deserve so much more than often they get. But that's brilliant minds too. So often, I don't know if they still do this actually, in my secondary school, the children or the teenagers that may not get or equivalent to CGCSE, or I don't know what it's called now, it's all numbers now, isn't it? But CGCSE apprenticeships like plumbing, electricians, and that was kind of seen as a great alternative. But I don't know if those apprenticeships even exist anymore. Like, how do you support the children that you know won't go to university, may not even go and do A-levels? What is the option for those brilliant brains to get into work?
Firstly, with these beautiful, amazing brains, that we need to find the right path for them. The first thing that schools need to get right is framing that conversation, because you can't frame it as, I know you're not going to get into university, so let's look at other things. That's the first thing, because it does happen. It needs to be, schools need to make sure it's framed well.
To celebrate it.
Celebrate it, yeah. And it's such a big change because, you know, I think society, like I said earlier, just expects degrees as a minimum. So I think naturally the way people phrase things are university first, everything else second. So it is a complete culture shift in a school. There are some incredible apprenticeships now like so much more than where they were 20 years ago. And I think the narrative is changing, which is really positive. But for example, where I live in the Midlands, the most competitive apprenticeships are the ones with Aston Martin and Jaguar Land Rover. So they're the most popular ones in my area. Thousands of kids apply. And it's incredible because on these apprenticeships, these pupils can join at 16 or 18. I think it's 18 now, actually. I think they raised it. They can join at 18 and they get straight into work, you know, start earning money straight away as well, which is great. And they get to try out loads of different practical parts of the business. So, you know, obviously Aston Martin is a luxury car, so they could be trying out spraying paint is one thing that they try. And they basically just go through the different elements of the business. It's all practical based.
And it's so progression led. Like they can progress through their career and they could be a top salesman or the top mechanic and probably earning maybe more than the people that have a degree that end up as teachers.
Yeah. Everyone I know that's got one of these incredible apprenticeships has completely thrived because they found an environment that's totally works for them. Like completely hands-on, completely practical, and they've just absolutely thrived and been super successful. Whatever your measure of success is, you know, everyone's is different. These people that I know have done it have been financially successful as well as really happy, way happier than they were in school when they were putting their hand up to answer a question on the board again.
Yeah.
Like so much happier. So there are so many more options now. Another great one for a lot of pupils with a diagnosis is agricultural college.
Good for you.
So a lot of them will be like working on the farms and things like that, which again is perfect. Like just being out in nature and like being hands-on and open fields, like all the weathers, like people just love getting stuck in with that sort of thing. So agricultural colleges is great as well.
So crucial to our whole society.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's become really popular because of Clarkson's Farm. Kids are so influenced by social media, TV. So Clarkson's Farm has obviously been super popular since COVID. And it's all farmers in schools now are like the cool ones, especially the ones that live down the...
that Jeremy Clarkson, of all people, is making farming cool. Like that is actually so funny to me.
I know.
We had a few Jeremy Clarksons actually for World Book Day, which is amazing.
Did you?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
They were like, he does have a book. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
The converse of all of this, of course, is that actually, and I was this pupil at school, you have kids that are really academic, but have a diagnosis as well. So I would consider myself someone that is academic. I was diagnosed with dyslexia very late in life. So I was 20 when
so
I got my
school. You left college.
I had done my GCSEs. I went to college. I did A-levels and then I went to university and I went to the University of Bath and I was so happy to get into that university. I kind of got through education thinking I definitely struggle more than my friends. I definitely have to try harder. I couldn't really know why. I just thought, and what I said to myself for years was, they're just, I think they're just smarter than me. I think that was the word I used. Like, oh, they're just smarter than me. I just have to try harder. And because none of this was ever a conversation when we were young, I was just, that's what my parents said, you know, just try a bit harder. Like it sucks, but you know, you just got to try a bit more. And then it got to, I did statistics as part of my degree. And I failed the statistics exam. I got 4%. It's awful. I was like, I had a list of numbers and then a computer and I had to run some stats. And some guy, one of the lecturers, looked at my work and I had basically flipped the last numbers round on everything, which is like classic. Textbook dyslexia. And yeah, he was like, you should have a look at whether you're dyslexic. And I knew no one that was dyslexic, didn't even really know what it was, heard of it.
And would you think like, well, but I can read, I've gotten this far, like surely I'm not as well, a little bit.
Yeah, because to get that far without anyone picking it up and to get that far with, and to get, obviously I was third year university as well, so I got through quite far. But you do reach a threshold where your methods, so I developed my own methods of self-coping disguised by I'll just try harder. I developed my own methods of coping with it and adapting and just trying to pass this game that I call the education system. But you reach a threshold of your academic ability where someone needs to step in and help. And this was mine. It can come at any stage, It can come at when someone gets to their A levels. That might be the threshold that they hit and they're like, I actually really need some help now.
Sometimes it's year 1 when all of a sudden the big words are getting smaller on the page and they start to jump around and letters get flipped and all of a sudden that becomes too much, doesn't it? That's the threshold.
Exactly. And it can come whenever. It could hit people, even when they do further education than I did, like at a PhD, suddenly they needed help to step in. And I got a diagnosis quite soon after that. But
did you feel then? How did you feel with your diagnosis? Did you feel relief? Did you feel more pressure? Did you feel, I don't know, how did that sit with you?
Felt like nothing when they told me. It was the weirdest thing because I cried through the whole assessment. It was like 2 hours of someone made me do something that I knew I was bad at. So the assessment was me reading unseen text out loud. I hadn't done that in the whole time I was at university because I avoided it, and my method of coping was memorizing. And at the time, I didn't think I have dyslexia, so I'm going to memorize this. My coping was, I'm not smart enough to read this. I need to memorize it. So it's really interesting when I look back. So when they said it to me, I cried through the whole assessment. They made me spell stuff. I was like, my spelling's awful. I can't believe they're making me do this. And I cried. And then they told me, and I felt nothing. It was the weirdest thing. It was one of the first times I struggled to process information, because then you start going through every exam you sat in. That I remember even now, a GCSE science exam, when I read a question, oh my gosh, 10 times. I was like, what is this saying? What is this saying? I read it again. And I was like, I can't process what this sentence is. And I was 16 and I still remember that moment. Yeah. And then as a 20-year-old going back to that thinking, oh my God, that was why. That was why I couldn't process that. And then obviously the more you read it, the worse it gets. But I was running out of time in that exam because I didn't have the extra time at the time. So that was making it worse. As a 20-year-old going through all of those moments where something happened, and then being the person I was, I just tried to find a better way to cope with it.
And you'd made it your identity. If you tell yourself something enough, it becomes your identity. So I guess in that moment of being told you're dyslexic, you were reliving those moments and thinking, I was never that. It was never me. It was this, it was this, it was this, it was this. You've got a lot of unlearning to do about who you are.
Yeah. The crazy thing as well, that exam that I got 4% on had to stay on my record because my diagnosis came after. I wasn't allowed you're not allowed to resit an exam if you were diagnosed after. So that was quite a hard thing to process as well, that I realised that I had mixed up all those numbers and got it wrong.
And now you know why.
Yeah, now I know why, and I couldn't fix it because I couldn't resit it. But following that diagnosis, I got extra time and a laptop. And up until that point at university, I was getting 2-1s on everything. I could not get that first. Every time. It got to the point where I get my friend to open my results because I was like, it's going to be a 2. Just tell me it's 2-1 because I know it's a 2-1.
Whereas really with your IQ, you should be getting first.
I just thought
you should.
Every time I was like, I should be, what am I doing? But then I go back to, but you're just not as clever. It's always been like this, Jess. Like, it's always been like this. Like, got to get over it. You're not going to get it first. Because I just couldn't. And then, I got the final year of university. I got extra time, which was incredible for me because I do read so slow compared to my peers. I do read a lot slower, and I'd have to reread things quite a lot as well. And I got a laptop, which was amazing because I avoided GCSE English so bad. So my sentence structure was really not where it should be for the university I was at. So the fact that I had access to a laptop meant that I could type everything out and then I could move things around, which made my essays so much better. They're the 2 things they gave me. I also started reading off of yellow paper as well, which really reduced my eye strain. And I ended up getting firsts all of that year. And I wrote my dissertation that year as well. And then I won an award for my dissertation because it was the best psychology dissertation that year.
And that is why it's so important for children to have a diagnosis, or young people to have a diagnosis, or adults to have a diagnosis, and relevant accommodations. That's why. Because it wasn't because you had extra time. It was because you have dyslexia.
Yeah.
Isn't it? You didn't get that first because you had extra time. That's not what happened. You got a first because you can get a first. You just need the scaffolding in order to allow you to show what you can really do, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I do what I do now.
Is that why? So you went from that diagnosed at 20, you had your degree, you did work, you fell into teaching. Did you
had a job in between?
Yeah. So were you a science teacher first, and then the SENCO job came up and you thought, I could do this because I can really relate to the children, or how did that kind of come about?
I got a graduate scheme after university. It was the most incredible experience. I lived in London. I did over 800 people applied for the job, and there was 2 positions, and I got the one. And my university were incredible at supporting me getting that graduate scheme. They were amazing. And I had the best 2 years in London. I just felt so much draw to be a teacher. I always went to university to be a teacher anyway, but I got this graduate scheme, and so many people applied. I was like, I've got to do this. Like, I've got to do this graduate scheme. So many people wanted it. I did it, and then 2 years in, I was like, I'm gonna go train to be a teacher. I just know that that's what I want to do.
Brave. It's really brave.
It was really scary. I had a pros and cons list written out for a good 6 months before I made the decision, but it was the best decision I ever made. And I'm so much happier now in teaching. But going through the teacher training, obviously my brain is always thinking, what about special educational needs? What about special educational needs? And there's just not enough training on it when you train to be a secondary school teacher. I don't know if there's more
nothing. I learned about dyslexia, so no, there's nothing. It's rubbish.
Yeah. And that's going through my head the whole time. My head the whole time, because my experience was I know there's going to be kids out there like me. I know there's going to be. So
at least, they're lucky if they get to 20 before it gets picked up. I mean, not lucky at all. Of course, that's a stupid way of saying it. But so many children can't struggle at early years, year 1, 2, 3, all the way up. There is so much need, isn't there? And especially for those teenagers, those teenagers that are high masking, that are like you were doing, making accommodations for themselves, telling themselves they're not good enough or they're not working hard enough. Making accommodations for themselves, but maybe they're not the easiest way, or maybe going a roundabout way of actually just fulfilling the task, when actually they could just need loop headphones, or they just need extra time, or they just need an iPad, or they just need a prompt. It seems unfair.
I'll never know the impact that it had on me in terms of that negative mindset, because I did always say that to myself: you're just not as clever, work harder. You got to put in more work. You're just not as smart as them. I'll never know the impact of what I would view myself as if I didn't have that. You never know, but I can only imagine that it would have been a positive thing. But obviously one of the most influential people that's been in my life is that lecturer that turned around to me and said, have you had a dyslexia diagnosis?
Yeah.
And I was like, no. That one teacher just taking that time or having the knowledge to recognize that was a sign, completely changed the course of
it was a huge fork in your road, wasn't it? In the path of your life. And now you are that teacher. And it makes sense to me that you would want to be that, because that was pivotal in your whole journey and everything you are and have become. It makes sense that you would want to be that for other teenagers.
Yeah. And, so I'll come into contact with nearly, I think, over 100 pupils a week, because obviously I have 9 classes, so many kids, because obviously you guys got to have your kids all day, which is lovely, but I'll touch so many different people's lives. And, one of those is going to be 20%.
Yeah, 20%. Yeah.
But so many of those are going to go undiagnosed, or are not going to be around people in their life that have the knowledge or experience in this field. So they just need to cross paths with me and I'll notice it. Like I have the opportunity to do that for someone that did it for me, and the impact that it had on, I only had a year left of uni, having that support and realizing that I could now reach my full potential that I kind of knew was there. I was always frustrated with myself because I was like, I just feel like I can do this. I'm running out of time or doing so. The fact that I only had, I mean, it's not 9 months probably with the full support, changed so much for me. Like my confidence just grew so much. I'd stopped looking at things, I'm not sure I can do that, to walking into an interview where I knew other 800 people had applied for and having the confidence.
Yeah.
Because I do think if I was in that mindset I was in 2 years ago, I don't think I would have gone in with the same, no, I can do this attitude.
And then the earlier you get that realization, surely the better, because then you're not limiting yourself in any way, or the environment or the people around you aren't limiting you. Like the conversation we were saying earlier, oh, I don't think you should go to university, maybe try this. Well, actually, maybe those conversations would look a bit different if they understood the whys behind these things, you know, and then put accommodations in place. Maybe they could be that thing that they've always wanted to be, regardless of.
Because I had a lot of unlearning to do. Whereas if you catch it early and you diagnose early, they're never going to have those learnings that I had in place.
Yeah.
And learning that started from 18, I mean, so 11 years old to 20 years old, they're such crucial years. And I was lucky, you know, I came from an amazing, supportive family. Some people aren't lucky enough to have that. So if they had my personal experience plus a family that wasn't there to support them through it, when they did think, oh, just not clever enough, like that's, yeah.
I mean, that's half of most of my staff team, honestly. I've got a team of 8 people in my adults in my classroom that are incredible what they do. They are such experts in the field, but because they doubt their academic ability, they will never be speech and language therapists or occupational therapists or teachers, even though they would make the most incredible therapists. They are therapists, they are medical professionals. They just, you know, they just can't give themselves that title without that training. But you mentioned going back to school for them, and you just see fear, like pure fear. I mean, even some parents, and maybe you get this as well, coming through the gate to drop off their children or going to parents' evening, some parents just walking through that gate with all their past traumatic experiences of school is huge. You can see the defense, you can see that the teachers are the bad guys because they didn't get me, they didn't understand it, the system, you know, you're hearing all these words because they were just so misunderstood. And it does have a spiral, like you said about the spiral earlier. It has a real cycle of I'm not good enough, therefore I can't, therefore I won't. You see bad, negative, or unsafe behaviours, and then peer pressure for them to then join, and it's spiral when really maybe they have the need, because ultimately we all just want to do well and get on. Really, there's always a need, isn't there? If you're seeing that kind of unsafe or disruptive behaviour in your classroom, there's a reason. They might be understimulated and bored because actually they're highly intelligent and your lessons are boring, or actually there's an unmet need there that they can't focus, they're struggling, they're falling behind, they're not feeling worthy.
One of the most powerful things I do in the classroom is genuinely, I struggle to spell words quite a lot, especially in science because they're so long. And there's some words which I always get a blank with. So nucleus, obviously in biology I spell nucleus all the time, but for some reason, I honestly must have written the word nucleus 1,000 times more. And I'm at the board sometimes, I'm like, how do I spell it? So I do it quite early on, and I do it with all of my classes because again, you don't know you don't know if children are going to relate to this or not. So I'll be writing something on the board and I'm like, they'll probably be like 14, 15 years old. And I'll say, oh, how do you spell nucleus again? I was like, I'm really sorry, guys. I've got dyslexia and I'm just having one of those mind blank moments. And sometimes they look at me like, wow, did she just say that one? Why is she like telling us? Like a teacher's meant to be this like perfect, knows everything person. And she's just asked us how to spell nucleus. But then you can see some kids on their faces, they think, wow, she's like super confident about it. And then actually, when you're really open like that, one, someone will tell me I have spinal nucleus, which is great because I've just forgotten. And two, just for someone in that room, that will be a moment where they're like, especially teenage girls, because this is how they speak to me. Like, Miss, I love that. Like, I love the confidence. Like, own it. Because this is how they
I
speak.
love that. But also somebody else will be thinking, maybe I shouldn't be ashamed because I struggle
Yes.
to spell too. Well, she's obviously doing all right for herself. She's a teacher. And
Yeah.
I couldn't spell that either. So maybe we're not too different. Maybe I can have aspirations to be
Yeah.
a teacher or different.
All of that comes with me just turning around and saying, guys, I'm really sorry. I've forgotten how to spell nucleus. I've got dyslexia. I just have like a mind blank. So much comes with that.
And maybe that
you
comes
know?
also with, oh, sorry, I'm feeling really tired today. Like I'm not feeling it. Or sorry, I'm feeling a bit emotional today, because that takes a lot of confidence for a teacher to admit that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it embeds a philosophy of, we're all human, we all go through, we're all different, we all have struggles. This classroom is a safe space to come with these things and to hold them together, and it's safe. And even if a child doesn't have dyslexia, they might still feel safe coming to with you about a bullying incident, because if you're okay about that, then maybe you'll be okay about this. It opens up the doors for those open conversations, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it makes me very real human.
With
And
flaws. We all have flaws.
yeah, with flaws. I think again, like there's so many different teaching styles, but I've never had a bad reaction to when I've done that, other than they suddenly think I'm real. I just hope that when I do it, that one pupil's thinking I'm not going to be ashamed.
Yeah. And also, dyslexia is probably also the reason you're so brilliant at science and can visualize it and practice, right? Because let's face it, dyslexia has its perks as well. Completely very creative mind, such a visual, learner. You'd have been the ones that would survive the tiger because you'd see it first, and all of those kind of things. And it's discussing that as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and everyone teaches how they want to be taught as well. So I naturally teach in a way that I wish I was taught at school. I was taught out of a textbook for most of my science, whereas I do the exact opposite of that in my lessons. So I think there's so many benefits to one, having my diagnosis with being a teacher, but also just being open about it. I feel like I am a lot better at my SENCO role because I've had personal experiences going through the education system struggling, and then having my year at the end where I had the help and saw the impact that it made. It makes me so much better at my job, and I feel so much purpose that I didn't have when I did that whole corporate job in London. Whilst it was a great experience, I feel so much purpose, and I really am so happy that I do my job now that I do, as crazy as it is working with teenagers.
Yeah, I bet. That's such a great motivation. What a wonderful way to end this podcast, with that motivation of, share what you're feeling, share what you're going through with your learners, and hold that space for them to then feel like the space is theirs as well. It's how you build community, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
When can everybody listen to your podcast and find your amazing things to hear more about such important topics as this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are the Teacher Experience podcast. Me and my co-host, Miss Biles, we teach, well, she's a science teacher as well, and we just talk all things teaching, much like you guys. So yeah, come and have a chat with us one day.
Some brilliant conversations on there. You get some really, really exciting and interesting guests. Thank you so much, Jess, for joining me today.
Thank you so much.